The Quinzhee snow hut was silent, except for the ragged breaths of its occupants. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a deep, oppressive quiet. But inside this icy womb, a more insidious tempest was raging. Alex was burning up. He lay bundled in every scrap of insulation they had, yet the fever pulsed through him with a life-sapping intensity. His skin was clammy, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. Caleb watched, paralyzed by a terrifying impotence. He was the protector, the builder, but this microscopic enemy was beyond his skill set. He leaned in, his voice rough with anxiety. "Alex, can you hear me? Alex?" A low moan was the only reply. Alex's eyes were glassy, unfocused. He was drifting. Brenda sat huddled, tears tracking through the grime on her cheeks. They had survived blizzards, falls, and hunger, only to be defeated by a forgotten cut. Diana, despite the pain in her own healing ankle, was the first to move. Her medical training dictated action. She unzipped Alex's parka and peeled back the makeshift bandages on his shoulder. The moment the cloth was lifted, the sickening smell of decay hit them. The wound was an angry, swollen mass, weeping thick yellow-green pus. But it was the skin around it that filled Diana with dread. Thin crimson lines streaked down Alex's bicep. "No," Diana whispered. "What is it?" Caleb demanded. "What does that mean?" Diana's hands were shaking. "It's not just a local infection anymore. Those red lines, that's lymphangitis. The bacteria is traveling through his lymphatic vessels." She paused, forcing herself to look him in the eye. "It's moving toward his core. If it gets to his bloodstream, it's going to be full-blown sepsis." The word hung in the cold air like a death sentence. They were in a frozen wasteland, 3 days from civilization with no antibiotics. The last of their supplies were gone. "We have nothing left," Brenda mumbled. And hope, Diana knew, was a commodity with a rapidly diminishing shelf life. Untreated, sepsis acted with terrifying speed. By morning, Alex would likely be gone. For a long moment, Diana stared into the flickering candlelight. Her mind drifted away from the freezing hut to a warm memory from 2 years before. A small cabin in the Yukon, smelling of pine smoke and dried herbs. She was a medical student then, listening to a First Nations elder named Aza. "You doctors," Aza had said, her voice like dry leaves, "you bring your capsules and your shiny needles. But what happens when the capsule is empty?" Aza had chuckled. "The forest does not know sterile. The forest knows life. When the body is invaded, the forest offers its counter. You just have to learn its language. You have to learn the forest pharmacy." Aza had led her into the woods, pointing to a scraggly shrub. "This is salix," she explained, tapping the bark of a dwarf willow. "The people called it the pain eater, the fire cooler. You feel a fever coming, you chew the inner bark." Diana remembered scribbling furiously. The bark contains salicin, the precursor to modern aspirin. It's a potent fever reducer and anti-inflammatory. It couldn't kill bacteria like penicillin, but it could buy time. It could break the cycle of systemic inflammation that was killing Alex. Buy time. That was the key. It was an unproven gamble, but they had zero chance with nothing. "Caleb," Diana announced, her voice suddenly crisp. "I have to go outside. I know a way to bring down the fever." Caleb stared, skeptical. "Go outside? What way?" "We have nothing." "We don't need the pharmacy," she replied, pulling on her outer layers. "We need the forest." The moment Diana pushed through the snow-plugged entrance, the -20-degree air hit her like a physical blow. The moonlight on the fresh snow was blinding. She fought the pain in her sprained ankle with every step, the image of the red streaks on Alex's arm driving her forward. She knew the dwarf willow grew low to the ground. She used her numb hands to brush snow away from the base of rocks. There, near a cluster of granite boulders, she spotted the familiar dark, reddish shoots. Kneeling in the snow, she used her multi-tool to slice through the outer bark, exposing the pale, yellowish-green inner layer. She peeled small curled strips and tucked them into her parka. But she needed more, an antiseptic for the wound itself. Her eyes scanned the area. She remembered Aza talking about a specific lichen, but she couldn't find it. Then she saw a patch of dark green needles from a ground pine, and nearby, clinging to a rock, a cluster of reddish-brown, fuzzy moss. Sphagnum moss, not antiseptic, but incredibly absorbent. A perfect natural dressing. Diana harvested the moss quickly. The knowledge was flowing now, bypassing years of textbook learning. She was no longer just a student. She was a survivalist, armed with the ancient wisdom of the land. Returning to the shelter felt like crossing a threshold back into hell. The air was thick with the sickly sweet smell of disease. Diana laid out her spoils, the willow bark and the moss. "This is the antidote," she stated. She instructed Caleb to grind some of the bark, while she made a bitter tea with the rest. Caleb held Alex's head, coaxing him to swallow the incredibly acrid liquid. "This has to go into his system," Diana warned. "It's what breaks the fever." Next, the wound. This was the critical part. Diana ground the remaining willow bark into a paste. Sterilizing her knife in the candle flame, she carefully drained the infection. Alex arched his back but was too feverish to fully register the pain. Once the wound was as clean as possible, Diana smeared the thick paste directly over the site and along the angry red streaks. Finally, she used the sphagnum moss as a soft, absorbent dressing. "The salicin will absorb through the skin, fighting inflammation locally," she explained, gasping for breath. "Internally, it's fighting the fever." They waited. The silence was excruciating, marked only by the slow burn of the candle. 10 minutes, 15. Then suddenly Alex's frantic shuddering began to ease. The violent tremors subsided into a deep sigh. His muscles softened. And then, a miracle. Alex's eyes opened. This time they focused. He looked at Diana, then at Caleb, a flicker of comprehension in his gaze. He licked his lips. "Cold," he croaked, his first coherent word in hours. The fever had broken. When dawn broke, Alex was weak, but he was breathing steadily. The crimson streaks on his arm appeared fainter. Caleb turned to Diana. "How did you know to do that? Where did that knowledge come from?" Diana pressed a fresh moss poultice to her own ankle. "Aza taught me," she said simply. "The elder, in the Yukon. She said that when society fails, we fall back on the relationship between man and the wilderness." She looked at the remaining strips of willow bark. "In our panic, we were focused only on modern technology. But we had forgotten that every medicine is just a refinement of something that already exists. The forest held the key all along. The willow bark wasn't a cure, it was a bridge. It bought them time for Alex's own body to mount a defense. It saved his life." Caleb stared out at the vast empty expanse of snow. The ice, which had felt like a hostile void, now seemed like a hidden library, a pharmacy waiting patiently. He understood now. Their survival had depended on physical strength and manufactured supplies. But in this critical moment, the victory was intellectual. "Knowledge," Caleb murmured, shaking his head. "That's the only currency that matters out here. It's the only thing the storm can't take and the cold can't freeze." Diana nodded. The hierarchy of survival skills had shifted. Caleb was the architect, but Diana, the quiet academic, had become the master of the most vital skill of all, the ability to read the earth and understand its deepest secrets. With that knowledge, they had survived another night. The calculus of their survival had just been rewritten.